1 John 3:16 says, we know love by this, that he, Jesus, laid down his life for us. And so we ought to lay down our lives for the brethren. We're willing to let Jesus lay down his life for us. That doesn't bother us. But we're not willing to lay our lives down. That's a problem. He says that whoever has the world's goods and sees his brother in need and closes his heart against him, how does the love of God abide in him? Something that happens way too often. Closing our heart against the poor. The next day we read, he took out 2 silver coins and gave them to the innkeeper. These would be 2 denarii, each a day's wage. So, maybe a couple $100 by today's standards. And he said to the innkeeper, look after him. And he said, when I return, I'll reimburse you for any extra expense you may have. And so in both of these, giving the money to the innkeeper and also offering I'll cover any other additional expenses, he's meeting the longer term needs. So this is not just emergency relief. And it points to a key quality of love, that we're not just trying to do something nice for somebody, but that we're actually trying to change lives. And that we're prepared to sacrifice in order to see that happen. That's the way of Jesus. So, he comes back to the dude he was talking to. He says, which of these 3 do you think was a neighbor to the man who fell into the hands of robbers? The expert in the law replied, the one who had mercy on him. And Jesus told him, go and do likewise. And that statement is directly pointed at you and me here tonight. Go and do likewise. So we have our instructions. Let's think tonight. I want to get into the question of practical ideas for how we can make a difference with the poor. And we're going to start this week by thinking about the poor right here, near at hand in our own land. We saw last week the complicating factors that caring for the poor isn't as easy as some people think. If we just give money or food to people, it creates dependency. It actually perpetuates and deepens poverty. It's not helpful. Yes, on an emergency basis, a handout, yes. But if you just keep doing that, you're really not helping people. You're not teaching them the things they need to know in order to sustain their lives and escape the grind of poverty after you're out of the picture. And instead, you've taught them to beg and to depend. There's the history of Western intervention, which has been very negative, frankly, in most lands. Colonialism, conquest, commercial self-serving at the expense of indigenous populations, and a complete lack of interest in them and their culture and lives. Then too, a lot of the underlying causes for poverty are spiritual, not just physical. There are physical causes. There are institutional reasons why people are poor. But there are also spiritual reasons. And so it's not simply enough to try to elevate somebody's physical standing in life and their personal wealth unless there's a change in the heart. It will all dissipate in a minute. We talked about a plan, just rolled this out briefly last week, that we need a plan for helping the poor that includes several caveats. We want to develop impact that is spiritual, that includes that spiritual part and brings the love of Christ to people, that is long-term, like the Good Samaritan, not just immediate relief, but which makes a permanent difference in people's lives, so that families and communities are elevated in a lasting way. Whether we're there with them or we go away, they continue to do well. That's holistic, a term that means that we don't just focus on one aspect of life, but that we try to cover the entire scope of human need. that also is contextualized so that we're not bringing help in a way that is trying to get people to move out of their culture into our culture, but which is sensitive to the cultural setting they're in and adapts what we give in such a way that it's fitting and works within their culture. And finally, one of the most important qualifications on this help is that it needs to be done in such a way that it fosters independence in the people we give to. And so when we add these caveats to the desire to help the poor, we've just made the job at least 10 times more difficult than it was before. At least. Maybe 100 times more difficult than simply handing out some money or food to people in need. What are these spiritual issues in poverty? We'll speak some tonight about issues in this country, but next week we have some issues in other countries as well. When we look at world poverty, you see that most of the heavy poverty in the world is in the southern hemisphere, much worse off than the north. And especially the continent of Africa is easily the worst when it comes to poverty. That's interesting. Why is Africa so much worse than other countries? We wonder that. There's a lot of reasons, actually. One of the key reasons is war. Also, governmental corruption and oppression of people makes it so that even people who are working hard and, trying to do right by their families and so forth will have that wealth sucked away. And also, anyone who tries to come in and help will have their help sucked away by corrupt leaders. In many areas of Africa today, we cannot even get in to help people for the simple reason that it's too dangerous to go in there. Bullets are flying, people are being slaughtered into thousands, and so these areas are just people, we have to wait until the violence dies down. Colonialism was a key cause of poverty in Africa. The colonial powers came to exploit. They came for profit, not to help Africans in any way, shape, or form. And the legacy of colonialism, the colonialists left, usually after bloody uprisings. They didn't leave stable governments in their wake. They didn't leave any infrastructure in their wake. And as a result, chaos broke out. The earlier tribal system had been replaced by modern conditions, but no corresponding move to a suitable modern solution was given. In America, we see the same principle. We have about 13% of Americans are considered poor by the U.S. government, which is defined currently as a family of 4 living on less than $22,000 per year. Yeah, that would be pretty tight. $22,000 for 4 people. It's about less than 5,000 and some each. That's not much. And this 13% varies between 12 and 14% in most years. This chart, which is older, I didn't get to update it. I was having trouble getting data on this. Percent income change from 79 to 94. Broken up in quintiles, where the population in the U.S. is broken up into 5 segments. And you see the top 20%, their income increased by 24% during that period. The lowest quintile decreased in real buying power. This is all corrected for inflation.